Learner processes. Well, in this topic, one of the things that linguists think about is about the black box. That is to say, how is second language acquisition? Is it biologically determined or developed within general cognitive abilities? And in learner processes, for SLA acquisition, second language acquisition, there are three aspects that are intertwined in the results of in the results. We have other knowledge, language processing, and L2 knowledge. The construct of learner processes comprises three elements that are in constant interplay, as I have just said. Well, first of all, we will talk about other language because for learning a second language, we don't only need knowledge about that language, but about the world. We need schemata, what is called schemata. That is to say, it is an unaware shared knowledge of universal truths, let's say, that allows us to understand interactions. Um, um, it is also called knowledge schemata, and it is the mental representation, let's say, representation of typical situations using discourse processing to predict contents of the particular situation which the discourse describes. The mind is stimulated by words or phrases in the text or by context, activate knowledge as schema, and uses it to make sense of the discourse, schemata, etc. And then the other thing that uh, has an influence in second language acquisition is L1 knowledge. Um, and in this topic, we have two things. First, transfer and language distance. Language distance refers to the differences that are between two languages, and this distance depends, or this difference depends on a large amount of aspects, such as the person's intelligence, the person's phonemic ability, grammatical sensitivity, etc. Um, and then transfer, um, that is, um, well, I forgot to say that transfer can be cultural transfer, uh, or, for example, this includes a variety of factors from literacy and discourse conventions to conceptualizations and pragmatics and conceptual transfer, for example, idioms. As correspondence is not always absolute, and then pragmatics transfer, learning new pragmatic rules may cause an identity problem and therefore an effective constraint. Um, then what we can say about this is that the knowledge of L2 informal language instruction can help us raise awareness of these facts, which are actually unconscious for most of us. I mean, when we learn another language, we learn better our own language. That is all about other knowledge. Then we have L1 and learning processing. Let's start by language processing. There are many points, and we will talk about them all. We have descriptions of language processing. How is memory understood in language processing according to two positions that exist? Then, how is learning in language processing? Because we have implicit and explicit, and there are three positions as regards if they can turn one into the other or not. Then we have processes. that can be automatic or controlled. And then we have aspects of fluency. In this point, there are two important factors that are attention and memory. Let's start by for the first one. Ellis in 1994 proposes a classification of the available explanations for the internal mechanisms that are responsible for SLA into two strands: those that focus on the linguistic nature of acquisition and those that focus on cognitive nature. And in the first description, we have the universal grammars technique theory. Sorry. Although this theory is a quite developed one, it does not yet offer a conclusive explanation of language processing. And then cognitive descriptions that deal with the next question, that is, what learners do with input data. And that is to say, um, one thing is, I don't remember. Anyway, then we have memory. It can be declarative or procedural. One is knowing what, and the other one is knowing how. For example, learning to ride a bike is how, and declarative is, for example, knowing how the word cheese, what does it mean, how it is written, how it is pronounced. Um, Declarative memory uh, can be um, can be recalled and the other one not. These two memory systems depend on different parts of the brain. Declarative memory is associated with learning, representation, and use of facts and events, and at least part of this knowledge can be consciously be retrieved. But procedural memory is implicit, a memory system not usually available for conscious access, and these two systems are hypothesized to interact. I have, as I have just said, and there are three positions in this next list, but it is the next topic. Let's talk about implicit and explicit learning. Implicit learning takes place without consciousness or awareness, and explicit learning involves intentionality. There are three positions about what I have just said. If they are related or not, they can turn one into the other. Positions about this topic is one, a non-interference position, usually associated with Krashin's, which state that explicit learning can never become implicit, acquired knowledge. Then an opposite view, which claims that the gap between explicit learning and use can be bridged by means of practice, at least for some rules. And the third position is two intermediate positions favored by supporters of focus on forms with an S or focus on form. That is to say, learners um, when it is focus with an S on the formal elements of a language without paying attention to meaning. Within this intermediate position, one is for making learners explicitly aware of structure, but the focus on form technique is not necessarily explicit. So one is focus on forms and focus on form, when it is the traditional way of teaching, and the other one is the one of the most new eclectic methods. Then we have automatic and control processes. Um, Automaticity involves fast processing and is related to the need for attention and effort in the acquisition of skills. Why automaticity can benefit SLA? For three reasons. Because automatic processing consumes fewer attentional resources than control processing, information will be processed very quickly and accurately. There won't be interference from other sources of attention, improving the quality of performance. And then aspects of fluency. We have attention and memory. Some approaches to SLA make more emphasis on attention than others. In this view, minimize the role of attention to a mere trigger of inner knowledge. Um, it refers to several mechanisms which include alertness, orientation, detection, within selective attention, facilitation, and inhibition. The attention system may inhibit the processing of irrelevant information, thus facilitating the processing of relevant information without interference. According to Smith, 2001, attention is limited and related to two general information processing mechanisms, namely control and automatic processes. Since attention is limited, it must be strategically directed. A third feature of attention is that it is subject to voluntary control. Strategies are internal processes account for how learners deal with input data and how they use resources in the production of messages. How they deal with input data. Well, about L2 knowledge, research found that learners' errors were not random but systematic. And then we have this page that talks about what are the stages of second language of the stages of negation. Finally, we have output, which is the external manifestation of a learner's interlanguage. And in this case, we have the output hypothesis developed by Merrill Swain, that it is in direct opposition to Kroshan's view, claims that producing language serves second language acquisition in several ways. Output makes learner process language more deeply and play a more active role in learning processes as well.